Make yourself comfortable. It's another episode of You're All Doomed, the podcast that has traditionally carved its way through the Friday the 13th series, 13 minutes at a time. I'm Sweet Killer Greg.
And I'm Brian.
And this episode, we're going to primarily be talking about the 2019 fan film Friday the 13th Vengeance. But before we get started on that, we have a couple other topics to discuss.
Yeah, I just want to let you know, Greg, that I'm coming in a little hot on this episode because there's a couple of things I want to talk about. The first one is the biggest news that's happened since we started recording, which is the announcement that Brian Fuller and the Paramount streaming network are going to be doing a Friday the 13th series, which sounds cool to me. Yeah, sort of. There's been... You may have even seen the same interview that I saw with Brian Fuller that came out recently, where he goes into a little bit more detail about what it is. But what are your initial thoughts about the news?
So my understanding is that it's going to be a prequel to the very first movie. I haven't seen a whole lot of description of exactly what story they're planning on telling. I would imagine it's the story of Pamela Voorhees as a single mother raising this special needs child working at a camp, and probably culminates with the events that caused Jason to quote unquote drown, that sets off her murderous rampage. And they might even include her first attacks on counselors as retribution. Depending on how you feel about continuity of a film we'll be discussing shortly. I whatever. I mean, I'm happy to see more Friday the 13th themed content. It certainly will give us something to talk about on our show, so that's great. I don't love retcons. We'll talk about that in a little while also. I don't love filling in backstory when what we had was perfectly sufficient. Brian Fuller has made some good stuff. I liked Hannibal the most. I saw most of it. I didn't finish it, but I liked what I saw. I feel like he has a track record of backing out of things halfway through, or maybe having creative conflicts with whatever entity he's working with. So I feel like I'm braced for him to bail on this at some point. That might be unfair. That's just sort of my general impression of him. He seems to have a very clear idea of what he wants to do, and that's not always in lockstep with whoever's putting up the money for it. But, A24 is involved in this. I like them a lot. I'm interested to see what they do. What do you think?
Well, there's a lot of interesting developments that have come out about it. So first of all, it apparently is a co-production between Victor Miller and Horror Inc., which is Sean Cunningham's company. And the reason why that's able to happen is because it's on a streaming network. It's not a film. It's not a theatrical release. And so apparently this whole legal battle that's been going on forever is about the film rights. And the loophole is streaming, because obviously that was never discussed when these movies were being made. So it's just kind of something that's not in the fine print so they can get through it. So cool. Whatever it takes for us to get some new Friday the 13th content, I'm on board with it. And the interview that I saw that Brian Fuller did with Fangoria is basically confirming that. And because of Victor Miller's and Sean Cunningham's involvement, at least from a producer standpoint, is that anything and everything is on the table. So that means Jason can be in it. The hockey mask can be in it. Jason's mom can be in it. So like everything is free game. And so that's also cool. The one thing that I'm excited about is Brian Fuller seems to be a genuine Friday the 13th fan. He even gave this anecdote about how when he was a kid reading the screenplay or hearing about the story of the original Friday the 13th and about, this mother taking care of special needs children and everything, and it really affected him. And so because of that, he's always been a fan of the series. So cool. Like, you always want a fan of the franchise to be taking over something. So I'm excited about that, but I'm a little apprehensive about what they're going to do with it, because he described it as a quote unquote pre-remakeable. So it's a sequel, or it's a prequel, but it's also a remake, which means it could be getting into what you were talking about, Greg, which is potentially some retconning, which maybe this series needs. I'm not completely against that idea if it makes sense, especially for taking out some of like the supernatural elements of Jason and everything. But I don't know. He also mentioned that over the course of this series, you're going to see many familiar manifestations of Jason. So I don't know what that means. I'm guessing, what we know is like Swamp Boy Jason, maybe hooded, sack-headed Jason, whatever. So I don't know. Like you said, I'm excited that there's going to be new content. It sounds like the deal is actually for 2 seasons, which is good because I feel like these days a lot of series get canceled before they have a chance to kind of stretch their legs a little bit. So, that's not to say that it couldn't be canceled, but Fuller made it sound like in the contract there were some pretty serious financial obstacles if Paramount were to cancel it before a second season. So we'll see. We haven't had to really consider how the podcast would handle a TV show. So that'll be fun to have to figure out once we get closer. But as the episodes come out, and we'll probably just do something similar to what we're doing with these fan films, which is just talk about them one episode at a time. But so yeah, I think it's good. Who knows how long this is going to take to come out? I would imagine they want to get it going pretty quickly, but at least it sounds like 2023 we're going to start getting some news about it. So that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I've all along said I want to keep this podcast free, but maybe we'll have to start a Patreon so that we can pay for the Peacock subscription, because I don't want to. I've tried to limit my streaming services to 2 at any one time, and so I'm like, oh my god, now I got to get this. But
that's a good point. Maybe we can just we'll make like a T-shirt that's specifically for raising money for our subscriptions to Paramount Plus, and sell 10 T-shirts and we get a year's subscription. So not a bad idea. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about really quick, I'm not going to go into too many details here, but over the last, months, even years, you and I have talked about what we wanted from a new Friday the 13th movie and everything. And now we're getting closer to at least new content. It's not a movie, but I've finished watching the most recent Halloween movie, Halloween Ends, and I didn't like it. I'm not going to go into the details, but wasn't a big fan of it. I enjoyed the first one. I thought Kills was decent and wasn't a big fan of Ends. And what I came out of that trilogy thinking is that I no longer want the movie, and let's just say movie because the TV show is already going to be something different, but I don't know if I want any legacy characters carrying over anymore. I know I've gone back and forth, but it backs you into a corner, even with the Halloween franchise, like this new trilogy, which was apparently planned out in advance. You could just tell that they just backed themselves into a corner because they tried to incorporate all these different characters from the movies. And I think it's fair to say that some of the characters from Halloween, particularly Laurie Strode, are way more in the cultural zeitgeist than someone like Tommy Jarvis or Ginny Field. So from a fanboy perspective, maybe seeing one of those in a movie, okay, maybe it'd be kind of cool, but I've changed my tune after this Halloween trilogy. I just don't think we need it. I think the majority of people aren't going to give a shit that Tommy Jarvis is in it. If you want to mention some guy named Tommy Jarvis, that's fine. But if you want to bring back Tom Matthews or even Corey Feldman, I don't know if I want to see that. Just start over, do something different. And that's why, even though the name is ridiculous, when Brian Fuller called it a pre-remake-wol, I was like, all right, they're going to start over to some degree and keep the things that work and maybe get rid of the things that don't. Fine, let's give it a chance. But this idea of if Friday the 13th fans think, and with all due respect to Amy Steele, but if they think that bringing back Ginny for some remake or some new Friday the 13th movie is going to have the same impact, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. Like, most people are just not going to care. And so basically the end of my diatribe is like, start over, do something different. And if you want to incorporate some of these elements with like name checks or whatever, fine. But I just don't want this nostalgia trip anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, and I came to that same realization pretty quickly after we finished recording our own season 13, where we did bring back legacy characters. And I very quickly began wishing we hadn't, and had just made a cool Friday the 13th movie without so much baggage. And you don't even have to tie it to any specific continuity. The basic story is the same. Either way, Jason was a little kid. His mom, killed a bunch of people because she thought he was, neglected and drowned. And then he comes back and sees her get beheaded, so he goes on a rampage. That's all you need. I don't need layers of lore. And, we're going to get into that pretty heavily in this episode that we're talking about. So I'm with you. I think that they'd be wise to just do a Jason movie. It doesn't need to have any reliance on previous timelines or anything like that. If you want to allude to, I heard he went to New York. Oh, fine. But even that's a little bit eye-rolling. So, yeah, I'd say just forge ahead and, make something new.
Yeah. One of our listeners, Andrew, hilariously suggested that this pre-remakeable series or whatever should just be the origin story of the busboy. And I feel like that's the only exception. Like, if you're going to make a movie about the busboy, then I'm totally on board with that.
Right.
But like this Tommy Jarvis, Ginny Field bullshit, like, just move on.
Right.
It's busboy or nothing. So
on that note, I think it's time that we begin discussing the fan film Vengeance, and I want to preface this with a couple of thoughts. One is I have to try to temper my reaction to this movie, reminding myself that it's a fan film, reminding myself that it's not an official release. This is not set in stone. This is essentially, a bunch of people coming up with ideas that they think are fun. And it's almost like a multiverse version of a Jason movie. So they made a lot of decisions that I don't like and rub me the wrong way, but I'm going to try not to be too mean about it because they were having fun. They made some choices that we probably would have made if we were making a movie. So I need to try to keep that in mind. The other thing I wanted to preface is that I find it interesting that so far, all of the fan films that we've discussed basically end their interest in the original movies at part 6. Like, there's a mention of New York in one of these, but like this, nobody's picking up on Tina's story. No one's picking up on
yet.
I mean, but so far we've talked about, several of these, and they all seem to basically, take from the end of part 6 and carry it forward from there, or at least in the one instance from Yorkshire where they kind of remade part 6, but they obviously were fans of part 6, and that's about where they stopped being interested. So I found that kind of entertaining.
Yeah, I have tons of notes as we go through talking about this, of just various references that go back to either the plot of Jason Lives or specific little background details and things like that. But yeah, we've seen a lot of love for Jason Lives, rightfully so. It's a great movie, but yeah. I guess from an amateur filmmaker standpoint, it's certainly a lot easier to pick up from that than it would be to pick up from like Jason X. Like, here's our
right.
our low budget production that's set 500 years in the future in space.
I mean, sure, that's fair, but yeah, and in fact, I mean, we get into part 6 references right away with this. The first thing we see is a production notice that this is from Brown Space Films, which, because I have a 12-year-old sense of humor, made me laugh.
I laugh too.
So we open up in a cemetery, and the caretaker, the crusty old caretaker, is actually Tom McLaughlin, who wrote and directed part 6. All respect to him, but he's a better writer director than he is an actor. This movie has a little bit of a problem with acting performances throughout, but Okay, fair enough. Um, he's upset that there's some like vandalism. Is that what's going on? I
Yeah,
mean,
there was like some. Well, I can't. Yeah, I wasn't clear either. I couldn't tell if it was like vandalism or if he was just finishing preparing the graves, or completing the graves, because what happens next is this like mysterious guy shows up, and we can get into a second who it is, but it's like their conversation makes it seem like he's recapping what is in front of them. So he's like, okay, I've done what you've asked me to do. So it leads me to believe like this was just recently completed.
the reason I question is that he utters, son of a biscuit as like frustration. And the only other place I've ever heard son of a biscuit was in the video for David Lee Roth's Yankee Rose, where the shopkeeper's like, son of a biscuit, my ancestors spit on your haircut.
Give me a bottle of anything and a glazed donut to
To
go.
go.
Yeah, it's not really clear what's going on, but like it's maybe there was some vandalism or something. But yeah, there's this weird kind of just scene that's going on because this guy comes up and he's kind of like shrouded in the darkness, and the graveskeeper tells this dude that he's like prepared to prepared the gravestones or whatever the way he asked them to, but that Jason was not in the grave. So this mysterious man tells the groundskeeper not to mention that fact to anyone else. And
Yeah, so what we're getting is that Pamela and Jason have grave sites right next to each other now, but Jason's not in it. Pamela presumably thereby is, or at least maybe 9/10 of her. So
a much shorter coffin for her.
Right. I'll make the same joke I made in season 4. Can you call it a headstone if there's no head? So it turns out that this is Elias Voorhees, Jason's father, who's kind of a dick. Like, I wouldn't expect him to be like a super nice guy, like Tom Hanks or something, but he like throws the money for the caretaker on the ground, like in this very imperious way, almost like Draco Malfoy's dad or something.
Right, and that's why I'm not really sure what's going on here, because like, what's the money for? Like, that's why I felt like this graveskeeper or groundskeeper, whatever you want to call him, was doing Mr. Voorhees a favor, and so that's why he gave him this money. So it's like, okay, well, he apparently did this favor for you, and you're still being a dick by just throwing this money at him. But yeah, I think it's just establishing right from the beginning that he's just not a nice man, Greg. He also looks exactly like Bradley Cooper in A Star Is Born.
Jason is, of course, under the lake where we left him at the end of part 6, and he wakes up. So something about this has kicked Jason back into gear.
Well, the way it cuts back to Elias, and then like it just like there's just a couple of shots where it goes from like Elias to Jason. It's almost like they're telepathically communicating with each
like
other.
There's some sort of connection that's going on there.
Yeah, because it's like he's like Elias is staring off in the distance. Jason's under the lake. Jolt's awake. We cut back to Elias, so it's like, I don't know, they're having some sort of conversation.
I mean, that kind of bears out later too. So whatever. We then are introduced to 4 campers. 2 of them are in a tent. 1 is outside smoking, and then 1 is stoned and or passed out by the campfire. So there's just 4 kind of random people at the lake having a good time. We see the lake beginning to bubble, like, Jason is waking up underneath and perhaps trying to get to the surface. And, apparently getting a lake with the right look is a very challenging thing. I must be needing to give scouting, location scouts a lot more credit for the movies that we've had, because they all have a very good-looking lake sets that they wind up filming on. And I mean, so far, none of these fan films have found a place that I feel like captures the same essence of Crystal Lake. They don't have the budget to travel anywhere they want. I get that, but yeah, I've been very unimpressed with the lakes we've gotten so far.
Well, even my parents who live on a lake, like Greg, you've been there, and it doesn't, like, there's parts of it that are like, oh, this kind of works as like a Friday the 13th setting, but not really. And so, like, I wonder how difficult it is, and unless you're going to those specific locations from the films, to find something that really looks like it. Like, I don't know if it's just a particular part of the country. Like, it doesn't, like, there's nothing that screams New Jersey in those early movies where it's like, oh, you only see that type of lake or woods in New Jersey. Like, I don't think that's the case, but you're right. There's never been in any of these like fan films or even some of the sequels where it's just like, this doesn't feel like the same lake. So I don't know what's so, like, I just don't know. It's not a tangible thing. It's just one of these things where like you see it and you're like, yes, that looks like it, or no, it doesn't. And there's probably lots of factors that go into it, but when it doesn't look like Crystal Lake, you know it like right from the beginning.
Yeah. My first big surprise in this fan film is that we cut to the couple that's in the tent, and we see tits in a fan film. And I mean, zippity doodah, I'm married. I can see naked breasts whenever I want, but
at least once a year.
I mean, right. But I mean, I was like, wow, that's a bold, like, for the actress. I mean, okay. I mean, this is kickstarted, so I'm sure that there was actually, money involved and she got paid for her role, whatever. But I mean, that just really surprised me that you would go tits out in a fan film.
It was surprising to me because it was on YouTube. At least that's where I watched it.
Right.
And I've watched so many things on YouTube that are censored either for like typically violence, but in some cases nudity where it gets blurred out or whatever. So when it just popped up, I was like, oh, that I had the same reaction. Like, I wasn't expecting to see boobs.
I had to watch it a couple more times to be sure what I was seeing.
But yeah, like you said, the fact that it was like a Kickstarter or crowdfunded thing, it was probably, released on some sort of video. And so that wasn't the original intention wasn't necessarily for it to be on YouTube, but yeah, this is worth mentioning because it's the first fan film with boobs. So yay.
And then we get some of the violence that you were just talking about, because Jason has come out of the lake, and his first target is the dude who is smoking by the campfire. And he uses the boulder that he is chained to crush the guy's head. And I thought that was fantastic. I really liked that.
It's very cool. Just before we continue with that, I just want to point something out. So there are a staggering number of characters in this movie, and
we're going to talk about that.
Okay. And there's just as many deaths, if not more, than actual characters. So like, I know we try to keep track of like names and who these people are, but I got to be honest with you, Greg, like, it was exhausting trying to keep track. Like, one, like, look all these people up because not all their names are mentioned on screen. So it got to the point where it was like, redhead, black dude. It's just like, I couldn't keep track. So like, if we know the characters' names, we'll try to mention it, but for the most part, it's just going to be some like generic stereotype or description because
I gave up, and I gave up pretty early on. But what sealed the deal for me was there was a person who got killed, and I was like, who the fuck even was that person? Like, I didn't remember seeing her before.
I have a feeling I know who you're talking about, and it's later on in the movie, and we're going to have the same discussion. Yeah. But yeah, there was just so many like characters.
We'll get to that.
Okay, so yeah, I just wanted to jump in, so I didn't want to sidetrack us. But the boulder kill was really cool, and that was the first indication too that I was like, oh, these kills are actually pretty creative, and they look great too.
Yeah.
My biggest, or I wouldn't say it was a complaint, but the thing that bugs me about that scene is that Jason breaks the chain off of his neck in order to like use the boulder or whatever, and it's like, well, if he could have done that all along, why didn't he break the chain sooner? Right. But like, whatever, like, just nitpicky thing.
He's a big Fleetwood Mac fan, and you never break the chain.
No.
He then kills the tent couple. It's basically like the sleeping bag kill from Part 7, but he's got both of them in this nylon tent that he basically kind of wraps up like a burrito and then smacks on the ground or into a tree or something. And that's pretty good. It's a little bit logistically ridiculous, but I thought it was good.
Yeah.
But I was very surprised that the girl who was passed out by the campfire seemingly lives. She runs away, and we never see her get killed. And it's very unusual for Jason to leave a survivor.
Yeah, she definitely lives, because there's something a little bit later on that confirms that. But it is a little strange that she gets away. So we could always just say that Jason is rusty because he was under the lakes. Well, the chain around his neck was rusty, but he's also rusty because he's been under there for who knows how long.
Wouldn't it suck if we find out that Elias has this affectionate nickname for his son and it's Rusty?
There's still time to figure out. There's at least one sequel to this movie. So
that's true. So then we cut to the title card, which was nicely done, and I like the effect of the mask being backlit and then just reversing to having the illuminated holes as almost like a reverse silhouette. That was cool.
And the credits are in the same font as the original Friday the 13th movie, so it does kind of like capture that feeling of the original movies, which was cool.
Yeah. It seems like they're reusing Harry Manfredini's score throughout this, which we've discussed a time or two earlier. I'm not thrilled with that, but okay, that's the atmosphere that these fan films are trying to recreate, and so fair enough.
I don't know if it was just because it was the second time that we've seen this done using Manfredini's score, but it bothered me less this time. I think I just kind of like settled into a little bit more. Mm-hmm. So it's probably just because I'd seen it before, and so I'm just like, oh, it's no big deal. But yeah, I wonder if he cares, or if anyone even sends like a courtesy email out to Harry and is like,
I would hope.
I feel like I would too. Just be like, hey, would you mind? I'm sure he doesn't care, but but it's cool to hear the music, and how other people interpret it for different scenes and stuff.
We open up on a scene of two sisters playing hide and seek. One of whom is, I'm pretty sure, Michelle Dockery from Downton Abbey. It's Ashley and Angelica Jarvis. So presumably their father, or they're related to Tommy Jarvis in some fashion. They're supposedly visiting Dad, but Dad is absent for some reason. He's not around. They're waiting for him, it seems like.
Well, we've met like 3 characters so far, and they've all been related to other characters from the franchise. So this is surely where that stops, right? Like, we're not going to get any more characters that are okay.
3 is the limit.
Okay, so that's good. But yes, it's Ashley's the younger one and Angelica's the older one. And yeah, Tommy is not around, but I don't know. This whole thing is a little strange. I don't understand what the relationship is with the daughter and the daughters and Tommy, because he's not there when they're talking, and and Ashley, Angelica is the older one, and she's talking about Ashley going to great grandma's house for the summer or something.
Yes. Yeah. We established there is a great grandma. Boy, do we establish that.
And that her house smells like cat piss, apparently.
Right. Well, I mean, everyone's great grandma's house smells like cat piss. I was very unclear of how old the younger sister is supposed to be. She appears to be like maybe 12 or, kind of on the verge of adolescence. But the way she's written and the things she does throughout the movie, she acts like a 5-year-old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's one of my least favorite characters in the movie, just because they try to make her like a typical angsty teenager, but she is just also like a little bit of a brat, and she doesn't really seem to have a whole lot of common sense. So, fortunately she's kind of dips in and out of the movie, but it's kind of a bumpy start to meeting the Jarvis girls.
Right. We also established that there is a tour group in the area, one of 2, in fact, that offers tours of the the locations associated with the Crystal Lake killings, sort of like a haunted house tour, but out in the woods. And I thought that was a cool idea. I kind of enjoyed that. I don't know that we needed two of them. That whole subplot seemed to be kind of overly convoluted and unnecessary, but it was a clever idea and a good way of indicating that people know this was an area with problems from its past.
One thing I was surprised is that this tour group is $600 for this experience. Like that's what they were advertising it for. And I'm wondering now, we later learn what kind of quality you're getting out of this tour group. But in a real world, if there was if Jason was real and there was a Camp Crystal Lake killing, like how much would you be willing to pay to go? I mean, I guess you can kind of do that by going to like Camp Nobi Bosco, but it's not $600.
Right.
But if you were going to like an actual scene of the crime, like how much would you be willing to pay to do something, assuming that the tour group was legit?
Definitely not $600. I would probably, if it was, I mean, I think it's pretty gruesome and morbid to go, like, I wouldn't pay for a tour of like Jeffrey Dahmer's killing sites or anything. I'd be like, no, that's gross. I'm not.
That's true. Yeah.
This feels like it's more of almost like you and I went on that gangster tour in Chicago several years ago, and it's like maybe it's far enough in the distant memory that it's more like a ghost tour or something. I would maybe pay $200 if it was like you and me on a weekend, like a guy's weekend, and this is the big event that we're going to do instead of like going to a big football game or something. We're going to go
like a bottle of rosé.
Right.
Oh wait.
Exactly.
Okay. No, it sounds like your plans are different than mine, but okay. Yeah.
And the heart-shaped bath. I'd maybe $200.
Yeah, no, I was just obviously there's no real answer to it, and I agree, it probably would be a little gross to do something like that, but I just thought $600 was.
Let me ask you this: does our tour have an adult film actress as one of the guides? Because that would.
That's true, because like we haven't really seen the fine print of what you get for $600. Right. We'll get to her in a minute. That little like infomercial for the killer tours, it's called Legend 57, which 57 is when isn't that when Pamela Voorhees
yeah, I didn't catch that. That's cute.
Yeah, so like that's the original date of when Pamela did the killings at the camp. They had a website which was legend57.com. I went to it. It was dead, at least when I tried. And there is a 100 or 1-800 number that I was thinking about calling like on air, like as we were recording. And I was like, that could backfire. Like, I don't know who that's going to go to, because it's been a couple of years since this movie came out. And I'm like, this could just like bounce back directly to like the director's landline or that one lady, the tour guide.
That'd be okay.
Right. Well, that would be a 1-900 number, but yes. But yeah, it was kind of funny. And then I think it's like on the same TV, like you cut from that commercial to a news report for
right.
I'm reading my notes and I just picked up on this right now. It's KIMA3, like that's the channel. It's KI kill
Kiki
Ma.
That's cute.
Yeah, never picked up on it until just now. Okay.
And it's 3 Kiki Ma. Aw.
Right.
I like. Okay, applause.
Yes,
for that. That's a clever nod to the franchise.
Yeah, I wrote it down. I saw it on the screen. I never thought anything of it, but as soon as I started to say it out loud, I'm like, wait a minute.
Cute.
Okay, so the guy being interviewed on screen is a guy named Sheriff Jason Riolotti, and he's going to be, or that name's going to make a little bit more sense in a second. But if I'm not mistaken, he's played by Steve Dash, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay. He was the stunt Jason from Part 2.
Right. And so even though Warrington Gillette was credited as Jason, apparently it was Steve Dash doing the majority of the work. So it's an instance where when I saw that was the character's name and that it was Steve Dash, I'm like, oh, but they take it too far.
How do you mean? Yeah, so they take it too far because, I mean, one, his name is Jason Realotti, as in he's the real Jason, and he even gets a little combative with the reporter because basically this news report is talking about the deaths of the campers that we saw at the beginning of the movie, and the sheriff is dismissing it as a bear attack, but the reporter is pushing, saying,
which I thought was good.
yeah, that's good. It's like, hey, let's deflect the attention away and just say it's a bear attack. But like the reporter's not buying it, and he starts pushing the sheriff, and the sheriff's like, listen to me, you little fuck, I'm the real Jason. And it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, they do take it too far.
Yeah, my notes at that point say, we get it.
Right.
But I did kind of like that the official story is that this is a bear attack, and that's I mean, a reasonable explanation. I mean, the boulder crushing someone's head, maybe it was like the bear stepping on their head or something. I don't know that, but it was at least it was a plausible cover story.
Yeah. We learned that we're not the only ones watching this news report. It's also the Jarvis sisters, and Angelica finds a note on the table that apparently is from Tommy, and it says, please look after your sister. I don't know when I'll be home. And it's like, P.S. he's back or something like that. So now we know why Tommy's gone. He's apparently heard about this news report before it was on TV, or at least heard about what happened at the camp before it hit the TV. And now he's out looking for Jason, and Angelica's just kind of like figuring out what to do next.
She's consulting with her friend Robert, who is an author. He's apparently writing a book about all these Jason things throughout history. He looks a lot like Roman from Party Down. So I don't know if we're supposed to like this guy or if he's supposed to be kind of a nerd weasel. But
I thought the same thing. I thought it was my note was that he was. I couldn't remember the character's name, but the dude he played, Martin Starr, plays in Silicon Valley. It's just like the long hair and the beard, like it's the same exact actor, but not nearly as charismatic as Martin Starr, but definitely looks like him.
We're also briefly introduced to the local drunk asshole whose name I think is Louis. Do you think that guy's wearing a fake beard, or
he is? Well, I mean, you see this in these types of movies where you get these like hyper stereotyped characters, like just so over the top that you're just like, come on, like, is there really this person? And like, this guy takes it way over. First of all, we now have our second fan film in a row where he makes a piss like a racehorse joke. At least
I made that same note.
He says it correctly this time, so maybe they learn from the previous one. But he is just like harassing.
Good thing we're watching these in chronological order.
That's exactly why we're doing it. But he's harassing the shit out of women, and I don't even want to say some of the things that he was saying to the women, but like just horribly offensive things. Right. And it's just like, come on, dude! Like, we get it. You're a drunk. You're an asshole. It's like, it's just much like Jason Realotti. It's like, we get it. Okay, like, back it off a little bit.
Yeah, there's no attempt to make this person a real human being whatsoever. There's a curious line. One thing I have an issue with this movie is it jumps around a lot. It cuts to scenes kind of almost unnecessarily or too quickly, or it doesn't flow together super great. No offense, but I found it discombobulating at times. And so I know in my notes this happens after we're introduced to the drunk asshole. Somebody says the line that Tommy wouldn't be here unless there was something going on. So we're back to covering Tommy's whereabouts. Why we got introduced to the drunk asshole, I'm not sure. Maybe it was to introduce some of the other cops, whatever. But we're back to discussing Tommy, and someone says that he wouldn't be here unless there was something going on. But doesn't he live there? That's why the daughters are there.
That's what I didn't understand with that whole like first scene with the daughters where they were playing hide and seek or whatever. Was like, well, where is Tommy normally? Like, is he at home? Because they make it seem
Right.
like he's not going to be there, and that's why she's going to go to great grandma's. And so I don't know what the dynamic is. But then Angelica gets this note from Tommy, which leads us to believe he was just there, saying that he's left and he's going to go look for Jason or whatever. So I don't know what Tommy's point, like like where what his involvement is with his daughters, how often he's around. But yeah, I was under the impression that, like, well, he lives there with his daughters, so he's always there. But I don't know. There's some
Yeah,
things
and it's not like we're in Minnesota or something. We're in the area. We're in there. It's Forest Green. We do establish that it's still being called Forest Green, but we're in we're in that region. It's not like he has to travel for any of this. It was just it's very weird.
This is when we cut to, and I'm glad you brought up the thing about the little like cut scenes that we get from time to time, because like I almost found myself re-editing the movie in my notes by like taking like two really small scenes and then just combining them into one, rather than being like, and then we did this and then we go here and then we go here, and like, just trying to like consolidate things a little bit because there's so much jumping around. But at this point we go to the actual tour group for this Legend 57 horror tour. And there's 3 guides. One of them, I'm pretty sure, is Sergeant Slaughter. Another one,
The guy who keeps spiking the camera.
yeah. And then
I don't know why he's doing that. It's not like this is supposed to be a commercial. Like this is the narrative of the movie, and he keeps spiking the damn camera.
He really does, yeah. And then there's just like a generic bald guy with a beard. And then there's a woman who, let's just say she might be in an adult profession. Any thoughts on, well, you've already started to share your thoughts on this particular tour guide and justifying the $600 cost. But
Yeah, I mean, we usually talk about the actors when they get killed, but since we're discussing her now, I know who this person is. Not only because of my extensive encyclopedic knowledge of Pornhub. Her stage name is Diana Prince, which is also Wonder Woman's secret identity. So Diana Prince is an adult film actress. She's been around for a number of years, apparently. But she's known in nerd circles because she's a big comic book and horror movie fan. And she goes to conventions and is basically a big nerd who also is involved in the adult entertainment industry. And she's also on the Joe Bob Briggs show that's on Shudder. She's a recurring character on that as like a male woman who comes and interacts with Joe Bob as he talks about horror movies. So she's been in the nerd realm. And I I laughed out loud at one point. I just sent you a screenshot. I was playing the Friday the 13th game, and she must have been a backer when they were kickstarting, because there's a picture of her on one of the walls of a cabin. And I never knew where I was going to use this or why I would take this picture. But I'm like, this is going to come in handy for the podcast. And lo and behold, she pops up in a fan film.
that's hilarious. I just looked at your text. Yeah. I stumbled upon that picture many times playing the game, and I had no idea who it was. I just assumed it was some person that was part of the production, or like the crew that made the game. And because sometimes they'll like, sprinkle in little nuggets like that. But that's hilarious how it all kind of comes full circle. And it's also not the only Friday the 13th, the game reference that we get in this movie. So, and the look on your face leads me to believe you didn't pick up on it.
I didn't catch it.
Okay. But that's hilarious. Yeah. So anyway, her name is, well, it doesn't matter. I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but like she's a woman, so her name doesn't matter. No, I mean, I just mean it doesn't matter because we didn't mention the other people's names. But yes, she is a very buxom woman, and she is a little out of place with this tour group. But I guess she's there for a reason. But anyway, there's 4 guests that are part of this tour, and it's like, again, just keeping it simple. There's like an English girl, a redhead girl, a white dude, and then a black dude with a baseball bat who is played by an actor who plays the same guy in Friday the 13th,
awesome.
the game. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Because I thought
that
it was so
explains
strange.
The bat. Okay.
Right, because he's like, his character trait were just like a little too specific. Like he's wearing a Letterman jacket and he's carrying a baseball bat with him, and everyone else is not carrying anything with them. So it's like, this seems very deliberate. So like, what are they trying to say? And so I looked him up on IMDb, and he was like either the voice or the motion capture for that character in the game.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Hooray. I'm happy about that. But then we're cutting immediately to the other tour group, the lame one, that it's being led by a guide who is going off of a script and doesn't seem super familiar with the content or the territory. So it's just like, it seems like it's a very disappointing experience. But they're attacked in broad daylight by Jason, and he wipes them out, except for, again, he leaves one person alive, I think.
Which one does he leave alive?
I remember, I didn't make note of every single kill because there's 8 million characters in this movie. But he beheads the tour guide, which I thought was great. And then like I don't necessarily think that they properly established that he murders everybody who's on the tour.
I agree that we don't see them all get killed. And I'm wondering, and we can bring this up later because it sounds like we had the same note, but there was, like, to us, a seemingly mystery character that shows up later and gets killed, and we're like, who the fuck is that? So I'm wondering if it was someone from this tour group. But her appearance later still makes zero sense.
Makes zero sense with the context of this.
Okay, so again, we'll get into that later, but like... Yeah, and this isn't the first time where there's like a group of people that Jason encounters where you don't see all the deaths. You just have to kind of assume that he kills them all.
True.
But it is weird that they like go out of their way to show some of them, but then don't even show you a body of others. And so it's like, well, then what are we left to believe here? Like, did they get away or did he not kill them all? Like, what's the deal?
And I'd be willing to give them the benefit of the doubt that he killed everybody, except the earlier scene where we clearly established that he didn't kill everybody.
True. Yeah.
It seems out of character for him to be so sloppy.
The only other note that I had about this like second lesser tour group is it reminded me of like what a Friday the 13th tour would be if my wife was the guide. And she'd be like, and then this is where Jeffrey Voorhees killed all those campers, and his mom was there as well. And it's like, that guy's clearly reading off a script, but that's why it's kind of like the cut rate budget version of the tour. But I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, agreed. Back in Angelica Jarvis's world, a team of attractive family members of former Jason victims arrives to help her look for her dad. We are introduced to Ginny Field's niece. We have Rob and Sandra Dyer's nephew, and then Chris Higgins' daughter. So Rob and Sandra had another sibling. Why wasn't that sibling out helping Rob hunt Jason down in part 4?
I don't know. I couldn't, like, there were so many layers to these three people showing up where it's like, and then this is Rob's nephew, and this is Heather's niece. And then the thing with like Joey Higgins, like there's a chance that Jason's her father, right?
Oh, oh no. Oh,
I mean, we got to throw it out there.
Well, no, I don't. I mean, I see where you're going with that, but didn't her moonlight encounter with Jason happen like a year before part 3?
I don't remember.
Wasn't it like her first time back to Higgins Haven in like a year or two?
That could be, yeah. Well, I mean,
man,
but she may have left out the part of the story where she gave birth to a child.
That's true.
And
that's
presumably,
fair.
like, gave it up for adoption or whatever.
Well,
but
then I gotta say, Jason's got some good genes because of everybody in this movie. I thought she was the nicest looking young lady.
I know, and not one wonky eye on her.
There's nothing wrong with a wonky eye, Brian.
Believe me, I know.
I am alarmed by how much makeup everybody in this movie is wearing. It's insane. This is like 2003 era, like black lined lipstick. I mean, it's crazy.
Especially given the reason why they're there. It's not like they were interrupted at like a fancy dinner party or something. Like they're showing up intentionally to go out into the woods and look for Jason, and they're like all dolled up.
Yeah, it's crazy. We cut to a brief scene of two hunters who are taking a break and drinking some beers, and Elias Voorhees basically walks up right behind them and gets way too close before they notice his presence. He is like looming right over them, breathing down their necks before they turn around, and they're like, "Oh, hey, what do you know?" And he basically then stabs each of them in the head. So he's definitely not a nice guy, much like his wife and son.
We can get into Elias Voorhees' motivations later in the movie, but like, I'm just going to say I don't feel like it lines up. Like his actions of what he's doing just don't necessarily line up with what his motives are later. So just remind me to talk about it later. But yeah, he just kind of shows up, and he's not, I don't know, he's not an imposing figure. I think they're trying to make him look creepy, but he's just this like scruffy looking like hobo in a, black leather trench coat, and seeing him approach two hunters in the woods just does not have the same effect as seeing Jason stroll up on two people and kill
He's
them.
not at all creepy.
No.
CJ Graham is a big dude, and he was a great Jason, and he's good at being scary, or at least physically imposing, but there's no creepiness about this character at all.
It's just like a gray-haired Neo from Matrix showing up to someone and stabbing.
I'd be no more
skull.
afraid of him showing up than just like running into somebody that I went to high school with in the grocery store.
Both are pretty horrifying, but
right. We cut back to the two sisters. The younger sister's being dropped off at, I don't think it's great grandma's house. I think it's a friend's house or something. So Angelica's going to go off on this vengeance mission with the other family members, and so she's dropping her younger sister off at this friend's house, and yet for some reason she's brought the little alien mask from part 4 along, the one that Tommy customized. I'm like, they still have that? Like it was his masterpiece? I don't, okay. It's like when Finn finds the training ball on the Millennium Falcon in Force Awakens. Like, okay, we get it.
Yeah, the only thing that I will say is I thought it was a nice replica of that mask, but again, it's just there are already so many things that we're being punched in the face with in terms of like nostalgia and connections to the past that it was like, oh look, it's another thing. It's the mask.
Yeah. And I mean, like, the whole point of a fan film is fan service. I mean, that's why this thing exists. But I just feel like were you excited to see the alien mask? Like, oh, there's the alien mask. Oh my God, I saw part 4 too. Like, obviously we're fans of these movies, and we've talked at length about the alien mask on this show. But I did not react well to seeing it again. Like, oh great, there it is. Look, we get it. It just doesn't need to be so over the, beating you over the head with it.
Yeah, like I'll offer an example of something that like did work for me, which like wasn't being punched in the face, was like earlier when we're introduced to Rob, the guy that's writing the book that we'll get a lot more exposure to a little bit later, but like there's just like this really brief scene of him typing on his computer or doing research for his book, and he's got a can of soda sitting next to the computer, and it's the same can of soda that what's-her-face pours on Jason's head and Jason lives.
Oh, that Sissy pours on Jason's head?
Yeah, like it was like a very specific like lemon lime, but it's like that's something where I appreciate the reference because I guarantee most people did not pick up on that. And it's also not it's not just like a glaring, like, look, everyone look at this. It's just like, hey, if you happen to be looking in this little corner of the screen, you're going to catch it. I appreciate that stuff much more than the really obvious stuff.
Right, or like the character who's drinking it doesn't say, I drink this soda because Sissy drank it when she poured it on Jason. Like, it's not, there's no attention being called to it.
Yeah. We then get one of those random cut scenes, which I think is really just in there for body count, but it's just these two women that have a broken down car on the side. And I mean, the whole scene lasts like maybe a minute, but there's a woman that's like leaning over the engine block trying to figure out what's going on. Jason comes up, smashes her head into the engine block and kills her. And then the driver of the car can't see because the hood is up. And so she leans out the window to be like, hey, what you doing? And Jason comes over and slams her head down over the like half open window and decapitates her, which I thought was a pretty cool kill.
Agreed.
But it was just like, we were introduced to these characters and they were killed in like maybe 45 seconds and then they're gone. And then there's no reference to it ever again.
Yeah, it was like Pete and Vinny in part 5, except this didn't even have the interest level of the ba-ba-doodle-da-da-da-da-ba-doodle-da, taking a shit.
I think every scene would be upped with that kind of scatting.
Yeah, imagine if Elias Voorhees is walking around this movie constantly going doodle ba 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 doodle da da doodle da da da.
He's like skipping. Like, I'm gonna kick your fucking ass. God damn it. So anyway, those two random women, they're gone. R.I.P.
Yeah, memorable characters to be sure.
Yeah.
We cut to the good tour group sitting around the campfire, having concluded that day's portion of the tour. And there's just like a lot of very juvenile tent pitching jokes. I can't even tell if they're necessarily being directed to the hot tour guide. I mean, I think they're just like being juvenile. They're not like even not I'm not saying that harassing her would be an appropriate thing to do, but it doesn't even seem to be inspired by anything. Like if she was like building the campfire or putting a tent together and like bending over and the two guys were like elbowing each other and saying like, oh yeah, she's pitching my tent. At least it would make sense. This is just people making 7th grade level jokes for no reason.
And they're doing it with such a straight face that like, you're right. Like who are they, like whose benefit is this joke for? Like, are they really just that stupid or are they telling a joke just so well because with a straight face? But God, that joke went on forever. Like that joke was longer than the previous death scene that we just saw. It's like, this is what you're choosing to spend time on.
Right. We get a quick insert of young Ashley Voorhees and her friend hopping on their bikes and pedaling off to follow her older sister. So they're going to see if they can help in some way. And then we cut back to Angelica and Robert, the novelist or the author, and they're visiting a woman that we are introduced to as Dr. Cruz. And at first I rolled my eyes because I'm like, oh, great, it's going to be like Dr. Cruz's sister or something. But they never really explain any connection that she has. And the more I thought about it, the more I liked it because presumably Part 7 doesn't even exist in this timeline. So this is simply that she was Tommy's therapist. She has an intriguing eyebrow scar, so she's got some sort of history or something. And she's a little bit of an unsavory seeming character. She doesn't seem super nice or super warm, but I don't think that she's meant to necessarily be related to the Dr. Cruz that we think of when we think of Part 7. I think it's just like they named her that, and she basically replaces that character.
I was waiting for the reveal to see Bernie from Weekend at Bernie show up, or like having a picture on her desk that shows. Yeah. But you're right. There's no, at least, and again, there's a sequel to this, so maybe it's digs into it later, but like, at least in this movie, there's no indication that this is meant to be any relation to Bad News Cruise. It's just the name. And so like, again, there's that's like the soda can. There's an example. Right. It's like, fine. Like that's a nice little reference. Some people are going to get it. Some people aren't. And if you don't get it, the story continues without any issues. And so you just move on and keep going. So yeah, it was fine.
We are then introduced to a prison work crew who is cleaning up the side of the road. And at this point, I feel like it's appropriate to discuss. There are way too many potential victims in this movie. I am rapidly losing track of who I'm supposed to be following or caring about or anything at this point.
I mean, this is like introducing an entire scene in the movie that takes place at a construction site with dozens of construction workers for Jake. Or like a SWAT team that shows up. No, you're right though. It's just like, Jesus Christ. Like, this isn't like 2 or 3 prisoners and a couple of cops. This is like 15 prisoners and 3 or 4 cops. And you know exactly where it's going. And it's just like I think this is probably the point where I'm like, I'm not even going to look up these guys' names anymore. Like, I don't care. It's like, there's just too many characters.
And yet I feel like, I mean, what bothered me about this prison work gang is that they took enough time to establish personalities for some of them that I expected that there'd be like 1 or 2 guys who survive this and come back later. And I'm like, so now we're tracking these guys too? It turns out, no, everybody on this chain gang gets wiped out. But yeah, it was just like, it wasn't even as throwaway as those 2 women fixing their car, because we spent a little time with these guys, really working that one section of road pretty hard, I might add. And so I'm like thinking, oh my God, how many people am I supposed to care about in this movie?
It's true, because there's the one dude who is enormous. He's like built like a tank, and you're like,
yeah, he's
okay,
like the president from The Fifth Element.
Right. So it's like okay, this could be a potential interesting showdown where maybe he survives, or we get like a big battle between him and Jason or something. You're right. Like, they start to introduce some of these characters where you think that it's going to go somewhere, and then it ends up not going anywhere. And it's just body count. But, yeah, I don't know how because this is the first time where, because like, we've been doing this podcast long enough that I kind of know how these movies go, and like just movies in general, like the structures. You're going to have the introduction of characters in the beginning, and then you get to a certain point in the movie where you stop introducing characters and you just start to follow those characters that have been introduced, and you continued through the rest of the movie. But this one, it was just like relentless, just like nonstop. Here's someone new. Here's more people. Oh, here's new 15 more people. And it's like, oh my God, stop. Like, let's just focus on one thing. And I think that's part of the problem that you alluded to, which is like all this jumping back and forth. And it's like, well, if you weren't introducing characters every 30 seconds, you wouldn't have to jump back and forth between this site and this site and this location. And so it starts to get like, I appreciate the high body count, like that's fine, and I know that's why these characters are being introduced, but this is an example of how you can really start to get things start to get really messy if you start to introduce too many people over a long period of time. If you do it up front and then gradually kill them off, it's a little bit different. But like when it's just this constant introduction, death, it's just, it's tough to keep track of.
Well, yeah, and I mean, in fact, this is very emblematic of that problem, because we cut away from the work crew back to Dr. Cruz's office where we get some more psychobabble stuff, and then there's a really abrupt, hard edit into the middle of the slaughter of the work gang. It's almost like it's already been underway for a few minutes or something, and so it's just like, wait, okay, we're back to this, and now all these characters that I thought I might have to care about are being killed. And it was very jarring, and the soundtrack was way overcranked, and it was surprising, but not necessarily in a way that I enjoyed. It was too jolting.
Mm-hmm.
The Vengeance Squad, run by Angelica Jarvis, overhears this slaughter taking place, and they run into the woods to investigate. So apparently they're already nearby. And they want to go see if they can take a closer look. They've left their Jeep behind with the keys in it, and so the drunky McFakebeard dude from earlier, he wanders over randomly and gets in the Jeep. And there was one line that I laughed out loud, and I genuinely like this. He gets into the Jeep and he's like, "Fucking cup holders, hell yeah!"
Yeah. Did you notice that? I guess is it Joey Higgins? Whoever the Higgins spawn is, her truck it says like Higgins Landscaping on the side.
Higgins Landscaping, yeah.
Which I feel like you're doing all this heavy lifting of like all these references to like previous characters and things in the movie, and it's like, and you have her be a landscaper, like have her be like an investigative reporter, like she should have been like Rob or whatever. Well, no, sorry, I'm getting Steven, I'm getting them confused, but like, so like, yeah, so Chris Higgins was just crazy, but that doesn't necessarily mean that she would have grown up to have like a landscaping company. Like I feel like there's probably something else that she could have done that could have tied her back to the Higgins family a little bit better, like property management or like something like that. But I was trying to figure out, I mean, like we find out a little bit later why she has a landscaping.
It solves a plot problem. Yeah.
Right. But it was like, it would have been nice to have come up with something a little bit more clever of like, what would a Higgins have been doing later on in life?
Well, right. And also it's weird. Like, okay, so her mother was Chris Higgins. And so, apparently, hopefully Chris got over her mental trauma from the events of part 3. And then, at some point had this daughter. So perhaps she's a single mom, and that's why her daughter's last name is also Higgins. But it's not like, unless Chris happened to marry some other guy named, Jake Higgins, and he's a landscaper. Like, I mean, so is Chris meant to be the owner of the landscaping company? Or has Joey grown up to be the owner of her own landscaping company? I'm not sure how old Joey is meant to be. But yeah, it's a little bit garbled.
And shouldn't it be Higgins / Voorhees landscaping? These
right.
are the things we should be
right.
digging into. But yeah, I mean, we find out. Actually, I think we find out here that the reason why she has the landscaping truck is because it's the Jeep that got stolen by drunk dude had guns in it. And so that is no longer an option. So in the back of the landscaping truck, there's axes and like even a machete or something. So it's just like, it's a plot device. But
yeah, and fair enough. It works well enough. We've established at this point too that Rob Dyer's young nephew here is kind of a hothead and a little bit of an asshole. Like I don't like this person. He's kind of a dick.
Yeah, and there's something even a little bit later on that like really does not paint him in a favorable light.
But yeah, go ahead.
But he's the of the 3 or 4 of them or whatever. He's the most unlikable, and which is just weird because these are supposed to be the quote unquote main characters of the movie that we're supposed to be rooting for.
Right. Although that's not a very difficult thing to achieve because he's the only one that has displayed any personality whatsoever. So I like him the least, but I don't care about the other 2 at all. So
that's fair.
At least he's noteworthy.
Yeah.
So yeah, Drunky McFakebeard is joyriding around in the stolen Jeep and makes a reference to Mickey Myers, which so that means that Halloween exists in this universe. Like they could go watch Halloween Ends. When whoever survives this could go see Halloween Ends.
Yep.
But yeah, so he winds up crashing it, I believe. Is that what happens? He crashes the Jeep. Like the tree came out of nowhere because he's drunk, and so he's trudging along and encounters Jason. And in a pretty good kill, Jason rips his head and spine out of his body, which was cool. I thought that was pretty great. I don't know why we needed this character at all.
Yeah, and I've always felt like in these movies, the death needs to, like, the method of the killing needs to align with, like, they need to deserve the punishment that they get, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And, like, this guy was just, like, a drunk asshole, and he gets arguably the most violent crime where his head gets ripped off and his spine comes out. And it's like, does he really deserve that? Like we could have just cut his head off, but, like, there's other people in this movie that I would have probably rather have seen that kill for. So I just feel
like does Jason know this guy is a sexual harassing douchebag? Like, Jason has to want to kill the person in that way. And he has no reason to be this upset with this guy.
Exactly. Yeah, because you feel like if you're going to be going around killing a bunch of people, you probably want to try to conserve as much energy as possible. So if you have the ability of just killing someone by, like, smashing their head against a tree, why not do that versus something that's going to use a lot more energy, like ripping someone's head out and their spine. Like it's like, save your strength for other things because you may need it down the road, like with these prisoners or whatever, and things like that. So it's like, I don't know. I feel like the punishment needs to meet the crime, and in this case, it was just like a random kill. I liked the kill. I just didn't think it made sense for this particular character.
Agreed. The other thing that I noticed was that Jason's eye hole is tricky in broad daylight. It's very clearly been... Because you want it to be a black void. We've discussed before that it doesn't always work if you see a human being's eye underneath the mask. But in broad daylight, instead of it being this like cavernous shadow, they have to like cover it with a sock or something. And so it looks like fabric over the eye hole or like under the eye hole of the mask. And it took me out of it. That's a tough thing to have to deal with.
I picked up on that too, and it reminded me there's like a really, really brief scene in it must be Freddy versus Jason, where Jason is coming out of the cornfield on fire.
Yeah.
And he's clearly wearing goggles under the mask because he's on fire, and the stunt person had to. But there's a reflection, like a very brief reflection behind the eye hole, and it's like, I see that, guys. Like he should have covered that up.
Yep.
But yeah.
We check back in with Fox Force 5, and there's a cute line where somebody says, like, didn't he, I hear Jason, like, made it to New York or something, and that's dismissed as bullshit. So we've officially wiped Part 8 from continuity here. And then young Dyer, young Rob Dyer's nephew, makes mention of the fact that his dad used to take him fishing around here. And that was, to me, that was like record scratch. So, like, you're telling me that, when you were in your teenage or, college age years, your brother and sister were murdered on Crystal Lake. And so you take your son fishing on Crystal Lake? Like, what?
That's true. Yeah. And I think I didn't pick up on that just because it was hard to keep track of what all the familial relations were with these. Were they aunts? Were they sons? Like, I don't remember what the deal was, but because I guess I was just thinking that Rob was this dude's father, but he is, right? No,
Rob was this dude's uncle.
Uncle. So you're right. So it's Rob's brother took Jeff. Yeah. Or I guess it could have been Rob's sister.
Well, no, his last name is Dyer.
Oh, so. No, good point. Yeah, like this is when you start to like get too cute with the details. Yeah. And
it's sort of like that couple that your parents live on the lake, and that couple was murdered, and the guy was decapitated. Like their kids take, we're going to go fishing on the lake where Grandma and Grandpa got decapitated. Come on, it'll be a fun day.
All right, so where did we end up?
We get a brief shot of the two little kids. They're lost in the woods without phone reception.
Yeah, that their whole story is so pointless.
Yeah,
like it never develops into anything. But
right.
we'll mention them whenever they pop up.
Yeah, it's helped that they are both such great actors. So no, that's mean. They're kids, for God's sake. But we've said that some of the performances in this movie are problematic, and unfortunately, I have to say that the two young women who were playing these characters weren't given a lot to work with. To be fair, but there's some rough line deliveries going on here. We're back with the tour group, and there's a reference to Springwood, but that makes it sound like Springwood. So like Freddy exists in this universe. So maybe they're justifying Freddy versus Jason in their timeline, whereas Halloween is clearly fictional.
I took it as not necessarily acknowledging Freddy versus Jason, but more Nightmare on Elm Street, because I forget what the reference was, but it was like he was trying to find, like the Sergeant Slaughter dude was trying to find the other tour guide, and he's like, hey, stop messing around. We don't want another incident like Springwood. So, which led me to believe they were probably doing like a Nightmare on Elm Street themed tour.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, maybe they're, I took that to mean that like something actually did happen in Springwood. They have a tour that operates there, but that means that Freddy exists in this reality, unlike Michael, who is a movie character in this reality. So thereby they could say that at some point Freddy versus Jason happens in this universe that they're creating.
Right. And there's no like that. This idea is introduced and concluded within the same 5-second span. But
yes.
I just thought it was a cute. Like to them, they thought it was a cute Nightmare on Elm Street reference for people who were going to pick up on it. Yeah,
fair enough. Sergeant Slaughter is then killed when a bottle is shoved through his neck, which I thought was a pretty good death. That was cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was one of those like thermal water bottles that I actually have sitting on my desk right now. But it was like, through his mouth and out the back of his head. So that was fine.
Be careful.
Yeah.
And then Fox Force 5 encounters the tour group, so they join them around the campfire.
Do you know? I don't feel like this is ever explained. Like, why did I think initially like they stumbled upon the tour group, but why do they stay? Like they're hanging around for a while, and I can't figure out what the purpose. Like, I guess from a movie standpoint, is just getting them together, but it doesn't. Like the tour group's not providing them with any assistance from what I can tell.
No, I kind of got the sense that Fox Force 5 thought that maybe the tour group would be bait to get Jason to appear and then they could take him out.
I think you're giving this more credit than it's due, but I like the idea. And I don't have another explanation, so I'm fine with sticking with it. But it was just weird because they like show up and they kind of like discuss whether or not they want to hang around, and then they hang around. But like every scene that we see with them sitting around the fire, I'm like, what are they doing there? Like they have no intentions of like spending the night. Like, hey guys, it's getting late out. Let's just stay here until morning and then we'll continue the search. Like they're not stopping their search, but they're still sitting at this campsite with these people. I'm like, what are you doing here? But I like the bait idea.
I mean, there's some lip service to them just like trying to find out if the tour group has like run into Tommy. They say like, have you seen anyone, an older guy wearing a denim jacket? Which made me laugh because it's like, that's the one piece of clothing he still has. To be fair, the hat I'm wearing right now I've had since 1992. So
he has an unintelligible English accent and this really crazy strut.
But yeah, I kind of got the sense that they were like, if Jason's around, he's going to come after this tour group. So let's hang around and see what happens.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll take that.
And then here's where we get into a part of a movie that I have problems with. We cut back to the police station, the sheriff's station, and Rielotti is watching the body camera footage of the chain gang getting wiped out. And I did like that body cam footage shows Jason, so like he knows what's happening. This is no bear attack. This is no, it's not a boating accident. This was a shark. But it causes Sheriff Rielotti to have a flashback where we learn that Sheriff Rielotti was the lifeguard on duty at Crystal Lake that day in 1957, and that he's flirting with Abigail Jarvis, who it turns out is great grandma that we've been hearing about in this movie, and they were the ones who were on duty and went to bang one out, causing Jason to drown. The first problem I have with this, and feel free to jump in at any point, but the first problem I have with this is how old are these counselors supposed to be? Because Abigail Jarvis makes mention of the fact that she's married, but in an open relationship, so she's free to bang the future sheriff. I always got the sense that the counselors at these camps were, teenagers, were kids. So that was kind of a weird detail.
I noticed that too, because as soon as she said she was married, now that doesn't mean she couldn't be a teenager and married, but like she doesn't look like a teenager. She looks like she's at least, mid, possibly even late 20s, and she's married and a counselor at this camp. So yeah, that jumped out as me as well.
But that's a minor point. The real issue here is that we now have names and faces for the counselors who were involved in Jason's drowning. And, the sheriff, it doesn't matter. We've only just been introduced to him in this movie. But the fact that it's tied directly to the Jarvis family, making it this sort of like blood feud that's existed for decades between these two families, is absolutely ridiculous.
it it bugs the hell out of me, and the more I tried to like think it through, like how this could work, the more convoluted it gets. So like, if like, I don't know, is it even established when Elias or Pamela figures out that it was real Lottie and Jarvis that were the counselors?
No, I get the sense that Elias just like knew it all along or something. I mean, it's.
But then why weren't they killed from the beginning?
Right. I mean,
like, why let this go on as long as it did if you knew exactly who they were? And they haven't left town. Like, they're both still in the same exact town. One of them is a high-profile role, so you know exactly where he is.
Yeah.
Yeah, this really, really bugged me.
I mean, it makes the world so much smaller. I hate when, it's sort of like how, everybody who's friends with Wolverine because he's been around the Marvel Universe for so long, that he's best friends with Captain America from World War II, et cetera, et cetera. Or like how everybody knows Han Solo because, I mean, it's I hate when they cause all these links between characters that previously didn't have them and aren't necessary. It shrinks the world so much and makes it too coincidental and convoluted.
Like, from an age perspective, I don't know if this would have necessarily worked out, but I think one way around this is you could have had Riolotti as this like rookie cop who shows up to investigate the drowning of Jason, and he knows exactly what happened, but destroys the evidence to protect the people that, caused his death or whatever. And it's like, okay, fine. Like, still, I mean, I feel like Elias or Pamela or Jason would have killed him by now, but at least it puts him in that universe in a little bit more of a logical light, because it's like, well, he was a cop, of course he's going to investigate this crime. If he covered it up, then I can understand his involvement. But having him being directly involved, it's just it's ludicrous.
Yeah, there's nothing about this that I like. There's nothing about this that if it were not a fan film, if this were an official entry in the series, I would hate it even more than Jason Goes to Hell. Again, this is a fan movie. It's fan ideas. It's, people sitting around. They were probably, sitting around on several nights coming up with a story, and they thought this would be fun and cool. Like, fine. That's, it's a fan service movie, fine. But I really don't care for that. But that's not even the thing I like the least about this movie. It turns out that Elias called off the search for Jason's body after only a week. So that explains why they never dredged the lake for Jason's body or, found his remains or anything like that. Because we then see flashback to Elias Voorhees, who looks a lot like Jake Peralta, carrying little Jason's body out of the lake. He's gone and found his son's body, and then performs a Necronomicon ritual to bring Jason back to life. So this is inspired, I presume, by the appearance of the Necronomicon in Jason Goes to Hell, which we never needed in the first place. And this is just introducing way too much lore into like, we didn't
need Jason Goes to Hell in the first place, or we didn't need the appearance of the Necronomicon.
Yes. And so this is just trying to explain too much. It's adding too many layers onto a very simple story. A simple story, admittedly, with logic flaws and gaps in continuity and explanation for how Jason was a little boy one time and then he's a grown-up. But, like, I didn't need any of this stuff. I didn't need it explained. And I don't care for this.
Well, plus, like, why would Elias, and you don't need to answer these questions, but like, why did Elias call off the search? And it seems that as soon as the search was called off, Elias marches into the water and has no trouble finding Jason.
Yeah, I think he called the search off because he didn't want them to find Jason's body, because he wanted to bring Jason back with his black magic ritual, and he may have even known where Jason's body was all along.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that doesn't help, but it answers the question.
Which I think that could be said for this whole scene. It doesn't help, but it answers. But this isn't even the thing I like the least about this movie. We then cut to a recreation of the cold open from part 1 with Barry and Claudette singing the thematically appropriate songs around the fireplace and then going off and getting the sexy look and going off to bang it out in the tool shed. And as soon as this scene started, I said, oh, fuck. Are they doing what I think they're doing? And yes, we get a pretty good recreation of that scene. I like that we get to see what actually happens to Claudette. She is stabbed repeatedly by the killer from part 1. But it's not who we thought it was.
Yeah. So I'll give credit where credit's due. I thought the recreation was quite good. Mm-hmm. The one thing that it was missing is Claudette's devastating fuck me eyes that she flashes what's his face. But I thought it looked good. It captured like a really good vibe. I thought this, like even the set or, wherever they were filming it reminded me a lot of what we saw. And the whole time I'm watching it, I'm like, they better not be doing what I think they're doing. They better not be doing what I think they're doing. And then at the very end, it's revealed that Elias is the killer. Mr. Voorhees is the killer and not Pamela. And I don't know, what are we supposed to say to this? Again, it's a fan film. It's not canon. It's just an idea. But I don't understand how this improves the story or why it's necessary. I think you could have still had Pamela Voorhees go off and kill these counselors. And Elias is like, what are you doing? Like, why did you do all this? I saved Jason. He's alive, and it's like, I feel like that's a better moment where Pamela is like, oh shit, like I just killed all these counselors for no reason. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But instead you have Elias being the killer. So where does that leave Pamela? Like, did she take the fall for it? Like, did he set her up? Like, I don't know. It just leaves more questions than answers. Yeah,
the potential ramifications of this retcon have yet to be explored. Now, it's possible that they will be explored in the sequel that we will get to, in due time. So I will give them leeway to at least give us a story reason why this would be a possibly good idea. But this is where the movie completely lost me. I don't give a fuck about Elias Voorhees. I've never enjoyed him being part of any level of canon. I don't think he adds anything to the mythos, and anything he does add is negative, like this whole, manor house that he lives in and his ties to the Necronom. Like, I've never enjoyed anything that's been associated with Elias Voorhees to this point. And the fact that they have now undermined Pamela's role in part 1 on any level makes me just lose any interest in where they're going with this.
Yeah, and that's the only saving grace, is that with the sequel, I'm like, maybe they're going to go into more detail about this, but it really rubbed me the wrong way, and I don't mind different interpretations of things, and looking like we're probably going to see this in this new prequel series. Like they're probably going to turn things on their head a little bit, and like that's fine. Like, I'm going to like some of it, I'm not going to like it all, but all I ask is that it makes sense from a logic standpoint. And for this one, it was done more so for shock value than it was for any kind of logical reason that made the story better or whatever. It was just not what you were expecting, and you're like, oh wow, oh okay, but why? And yeah, I don't think anyone knows why, at least yet.
Yeah, I mean, your reaction is probably more fair than mine is, but I have, I feel as a story device that the everything was wrong retcon is second in cheapness only to it was all a dream all along. And this is just flat out one of those, let's pull the rug out by saying it was never Mrs. Voorhees in the first place. I hate that shit.
Because it also changes the motivation of Jason. Jason is who he is because he saw his mother get killed. Does his mother still get killed? And if so, why? If Elias was the killer? Like, I don't know. There's so many questions. And it just changes. There's too much of a snowball effect of like how this impacts things. It's not just changing it from Pamela to Elias. Like there's so much more to that, and I just don't know yet if they've thought through what the ramifications of that decision were.
And how far does it go? Because I mean, the only person that we see Pamela interacting with on screen is Alice. Every other kill in part 1 could turn out to have been Elias, and I will not like that at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that didn't occur to me, but yeah, that's very true. Because even the scene in part 1 where Steve Christie, he's like, "Oh, hey, what are you doing out here in this mess?" Could have been Elias.
Right.
So, yeah. That should just be the explanation for everything. Could have been Elias.
Dream demons. To be fair, we then cut to the greatest scene in cinema history when the British tour customer announces that she's going to go to sleep, and the hot tour guide also announces that she's going to go to sleep, but instead they just go and make out.
Yeah, they like head down to the lake to scissor each other.
And the beardy tour guide goes to pee, and where is he peeing in relationship to the two girls making out? It seems like he's like 10 feet away with no shrubbery between them. But it feels like he's there watching, but not. I'm very unclear as to where they are in a relationship.
It is weird because it seems like his back is turned, but he's kind of like looking over his shoulder, and the way he's looking over his shoulder makes it seem like they are like fucking each other like right there.
Yeah.
And so it's like,
yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird things because no, you keep going.
Well, no, then we start getting into Jason killing more people, and I don't remember what happens to the beardy tour guide. I know he gets killed, but I don't remember what happens to him. Maybe we're not even there yet.
I think. Well, so the two girls, they're making out and they get skewered like Jeff and Sandra, right?
Yeah, but it's like he spears them through the head, maybe?
It is a weird kill. It's not like the final shot we see is this them laying on top of each other dead, like, or like motionless, so we're just assuming they got skewered somehow. And then I think the bearded tour guide gets killed right after that. Oh, yeah, because he gets like... at least what it looks like, he gets speared through his ass and it comes through the front of his shorts. And
right.
And out loud I go, "He's pitching a tent." And so I don't know if that's the joke, but that was the joke that I made watching it because that was the only way.
And then they cut to the corn dog, which was a funny transition too, because like the stick is going into the corn dog.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Meanwhile, the other two tour customers, the guy and the girl, they go down to the lake to screw around in the water, and Jeff Dyer follows them. And it seems like he's truly peeping, right? Like he's getting his jollies off on this,
and he's like aggressively, like not yelling at them, but yelling to himself. He's like, "Hurry up and fucking get it over with." So like, I couldn't tell if he's like wants them to fucking get it over with so they'll leave, or if he's because he's watching them and he wants to see that happen, but he's like really aggressive about it. But it's like, I got the impression that, yeah, he's totally like peeping on him.
But then he's killed in like very unceremoniously. Like he was kind of the character that was being set up with the biggest axe to grind, no pun intended. Like I thought he was going to go the distance because he was the one that was really truly most angry about Jason, but he's knocked off, and so he's gone.
Yeah, and
no
it's
big
not even,
loss, but
at least I couldn't really tell how he was killed. But like, because I think that like the couple that's making out in the water, I think they hear a commotion on the shore. Maybe it was the girls getting killed or the tour guide getting killed, or maybe they hear Jeff. I don't know, but like one of them comes, like the guy comes out of the water, and that's when Jeff gets killed. We don't really see what happens to Jeff, but he gets killed. And then like in short order, the dude that was in the water gets killed as well. I I don't have a note that even says how he was killed. So it's probably just like some ambiguous,
Right.
off screen, like skewer or something. But yeah, they did set up Jeff as like the one that like has the most personal attachment to this story or tracking down Jason. And they immediately like turn him into this like peeping Tom asshole. And then he gets killed. And you're like, all right, I guess he's gone then.
Right. So yeah, then like you said, David, who was the guy making out in the lake, he's killed somehow. I didn't make note of it either. I did make note of the girl who he left behind in the water, how she got killed. Jason shoves her underwater and snaps her neck, but I don't understand how Jason is staying afloat while he's shoving her under the water and holding her down. Like, it's deep enough that he's not standing because she's fully submerged. But how, does he have like an inflatable vest on? Like, I don't understand how Jason is staying so high above the water.
He's got arm floaties on.
Right? I mean, it would make sense because we know he's a bad swimmer.
Right.
But
The kill, I couldn't figure out what was going on with the kill either. I just, in terms of like giving credit where it's due, I thought it was a pretty nice underwater shot. It's at night
yeah.
and like it's well lit and there's like quite a bit of struggle with the girl. So I was like, oh, it's kind of cool. But yeah, it's not exactly clear how Jason is doing this, but I feel like that's the case with a lot of his water kills, where it's just like,
yes,
how is
that's
he
not a fault
standing
of
or...
just this movie.
True.
And I'll take this moment because I've been shitting on it a little bit. Something you just said reminded me that I did want to praise. This movie looks great. Like, this movie is another very polished looking production. They obviously put some money into it, and there are some shots that I thought were good. And so I it's not that I'm trying to say it's a total piece of garbage. I just don't like some of the story decisions that they have made.
Right. I agree.
The next note I have is the kid with the baseball bat facing off against Jason.
Which, again, it's another missed opportunity. This guy's carrying around a baseball bat the entire movie, and all he manages to do is to get one swing off on Jason, and I think the bat does break. The bat breaks,
yeah.
And Jason doesn't flinch. So it's like, okay, that's cool. And then Jason kills him with the broken bat. Or no, he doesn't even do that. He
shears off the top of that guy's head in a pretty wonky effect.
Yeah, he bisects the guy's head horizontally. But yeah, it's like, why do you have a guy carrying around a baseball bat and then all he does is get one swing? Like, either have him get killed by the baseball bat or have there be a bigger battle with the bat. But I will say that because he was just a reference to the game, I'll be like, all right, fine, I'll let it slide. Like the top half of his head slid off.
Nice. We then cut to Elias invading Great Grandma's house. She's basically nothing more than a crazy cat lady, and he kills her. Why is he killing her now? Why, after all this time, does he choose this moment?
That's what I was saying before. Like, why is the sheriff and Great Grandma still alive? She's apparently lived there a long time. He's been the sheriff there for a while. This is probably a note that I should have probably brought up sooner, but like, why is it Great Grandma? Like, I'm trying to think of the family lineage here. Like, why can't it be Grandma? Because it would be Tommy's mother, right?
No, it's Tommy's grandma.
Well, no, but the grandma would have been Tommy's mother. So the great grandma is Tommy's grandma.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, like, why? Where's
from
Tommy's
the kid's
mom?
Perspective?
Right. Like, where's Tommy's mom?
Well,
like,
she's dead.
How do we know that?
Well, I mean, it's pretty much established. Like, part 4, we don't know for sure what happens to Tommy's mom in part 4 because we only see her go like, but it's generally assumed that she's dead.
Oh, that's true. You're right.
There was the whole deleted scene about her being, like a white-eyed zombie in the bathtub, whatever. It's just, now they could retcon that, but I think that the implication here is that Tommy's mom is dead, and so it's his grandmother that was, and I mean, his grandmother would be a Jarvis. Tommy's mom wasn't a Jarvis until she married Tommy's dad.
Okay. No, that's right. Yeah, I forgot that it was more or less implied that Tommy's mom was dead. So, okay. No, I just thought it was silly that it was like great grandma. Like, you and I have joked about the whole like Grandpa Palpatine or whatever, like all that bullshit. Like,
Right.
it's just like, it just sounds stupid when you say it out loud. And so it's like great grandma Jarvis. It's like, okay, so that's fine.
Yeah. And then Elias goes and kills Sheriff Riolotti. And I mean, I thought it was fun that CJ Graham, who played Jason in part 6, is killing Steve Dash, who played Jason in part 2. A little bit of a Jason versus Jason moment. Like, that was a decent little fan service thing.
But again, there's even like an exchange between Elias and Riolotti where he's like, Riolotti's like, I've been waiting for this moment, or like, go ahead and do it, or, you know, like something like that. So it's like, like what were you waiting for? Like,
right.
Why all this time? But yeah, this all happens so quickly too. So it's like, I don't know. I'm trying to think this out as we're talking about it too. The only explanation I can kind of think of is maybe Elias had left town for a long period of time, and him coming back to that gravesite at the beginning is him returning to town for the first time. There's probably plenty of evidence that suggests that's not the case, but if he's been gone for a long period of time, he comes back because now his wife and son are buried, and then he's going to go finish the job.
Mm-hmm.
But like it's never established, but
no.
Like, I'm just trying to like give them like the benefit of the doubt here.
Yeah. And there may be some work done on that in the sequel, because later in this movie we hear someone drops the factoid that there are 3 death certificates for Elias Voorhees. So he's obviously gone through some, you know, there's some saga that we have yet to be privy to, and that may help explain why he's waited 62 years to come back and kill great grandma and the sheriff. Then we cut back to the campsite, and I don't know how I feel about this. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Ginny's daughter tries to escape Jason using the same tactic her mother did, where she pretends to be Pamela Voorhees and, you know, Jason, mother is talking to you. And it very much does not work this time. Jason, it's pretty goddamn funny how many times he stabs her. Like, he's really pissed off that she tried this. But I don't know how I feel about it. What do you think?
Well, first of all, Ginny's her aunt. So it's
is that right?
Yeah,
okay.
So it's even farther removed from mother and daughter. If it was mother and daughter, I would have said, okay, Ginny probably would have had this conversation at some point with her daughter about how she took down Jason, sharing like specific details. But the like aunt and niece relationship, like I doubt that Ginny's going to be going into this type of specifics. And it's not a coincidence that this is just the niece pulling this out of her ass. Like, she knows exactly what she's doing, almost like, my aunt tried this, I'm going to try it now. The only thing that I liked about this scene is Jason's response, which is like, fuck you, I'm not going to respond to this a second time. Like, you tried this once, I'm not going to fall for it a second time.
Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, right. I fucking kill you.
Yeah. So I liked the response, and I feel like that was the only reason why it was introduced, so Jason could have that response. But I just don't understand the relationship between these like relatives and whether or not they're going to know this much information. Like, these people went through a traumatic event. Are they really going to like sit down with their like niece and nephew and be like, let me tell you all about the time I encountered Jason? Like, they're just not going to.
I'm going to give it to you straight about Jason.
Right. So yeah, like mother, daughter, mother, son, whatever, like, fine, maybe. But I just feel like there's a little bit too much of a distance here for this to be something that whatever her name was it no, I don't know, whatever, Ginny's niece, like, for her to know these details about this encounter that Ginny had with Jason, whatever, I don't buy it.
We then cut to the little kids in the woods who have, at some point along the way, encountered the police. So they're with 2 deputies, one of whom is a woman, and she's killed by Elias. And this is truly the part in the movie where I just said there are too many factions running around here that I'm supposed to be keeping track of, and I've lost all interest in knowing who is where and who's being killed by whom.
Well, this is also where we get to the scene that we've teased a few times in this conversation, where we go back to the campsite, which I'm guessing, and I'm spelling this out to see if we can figure it out, but it's the Legend 57 tour group campsite, right, where everyone was.
Is it though?
I don't know, but that's what I thought, because I feel like by this point in the movie, everyone is left. Like, they're all doing their own things. Like, there was the couple that went down, like the two women that were scrumping on the beach. And then there was the couple that went in the water, and then Jeff is gone. And like, people are gone. So like, and I know that there was one person that was staying behind, but that was Ginny's niece who just got killed.
Right. So let's back it up. What happens here is that a young woman comes back to a tent and gets in the tent and then strips by herself. She takes off all of her clothes inside the tent. At which point I said, who the fuck is this person? I have no idea who this character is.
She's a redhead. And I remember describing one of the tour group people as a redhead. And I thought, well, is it her? And I'm like, no, I think she's dead. And again, it would help if I remembered all the character names. But I'm like, I don't think it's the same character. And she seems to be by herself, but she's stripping provocatively by herself in this tent. Like, she's doing like a strip show and there's no one else around.
Right.
And she shows up. She doesn't say a word. She starts to take her top off. She hears a sound. She puts her top back on. She goes outside and she gets killed. And like you said, I was like, who was that? And I still, as of right this second, I don't know who this was.
Not a clue.
So you had mentioned earlier on that I think it was the budget tour group where Jason shows up and you're not sure if everyone got killed.
Right.
I have not gone back to see if there was if the woman in that tour group resembled this woman. But even if it was her, why is she carefree at the campsite stripping and like I think she's even like singing a song or like humming or something. Like, she doesn't have a worry in the world. So like, she just saw these people get murdered if it was her. So it's like, I don't think it's her. I don't know. Like, was it like a deleted scene and they forgot to put in another scene that she was in? But like, I'm glad that you didn't know who it was, because my note, all my note was, it just is highlighted. It says, who the fuck is this? So like, and this is like, I guess like a new degree of just introducing a character and having them get killed just for the sake of body count. But it's like, wow, like, okay, there's just random girl that gets killed.
Yeah.
With like 5 minutes left in the movie.
Right. Or did they already kill her and they forgot that they already killed her? Like, I was so baffled by this that.
Yeah. So if anyone listening to this, if you have any thoughts, please like let us know. Like either on email or social media or something, because like I don't know who it is. Like, it's the biggest mystery of this movie.
Right. I'm absolutely happy to be wrong. It came at a perfect moment because I was already feeling like there are too many people to keep track of. I have no idea who's where, and then there's this person. Yeah. It was dumbfounding to me. Meanwhile, apparently, Angelica Jarvis, her reporter friend Robert, and Chris Higgins' daughter have split off. They've gone out of the campsite, and they are off prowling around the old campsite, which still has the Crystal Lake sign, even though I thought that the whole area was renamed Forest Green and that they bulldozed the camp and renamed it. Like, so that was a weird lapse in the continuity they're trying to establish.
And they flipped one switch and all the power on the camp went on.
Right.
Right.
They're prowling around in the dark cabins, and they find a random Coleman lantern that Angelica recognizes from a dent as belonging to her father. So now she knows he's been there. The movie is trying to make us worry about Tommy's whereabouts, and I am not worried about Tommy's whereabouts.
Not in the slightest bit.
Meanwhile, little Higgins is standing outside, and gets spooked. And so as she's heading in the door of the cabin, she gets scorpioned by Jason. Get over here. It was nuts. Like something spears her through the middle, and then she's dragged backwards through the darkness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I liked it. It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
It reminded me, I don't even remember anymore which one. It was one of the Never Hike movies, where like someone was like dragged out of the cabin into the woods or something like that. I might be misremembering it, but it was just like a cool shot of like, she was almost in the door of the cabin. She gets like hit from behind and then suddenly dragged, and you just see her like kind of disappear in the darkness. I thought it was a cool shot.
Yeah, it's a little bit like that final shot of Wreck. Perhaps not as artfully done. But,
oh, right. Yeah.
And then, Angelica runs out into the woods to look for her friend. She hears the screams, and she finds the young woman lashed to a tree. And it looks like she was waiting for Angelica to get there before she would bleed out and die, because it happens the moment she's discovered. Meanwhile, Robert, the author, encounters Jason and hides under an overturned boat, which would have maybe been successful if it wasn't the only other thing in the shot.
Right. It's just an empty beach with this like dilapidated boat that he hides under. It's like, well, there's not many other places to hide.
Yeah. So unsurprisingly, Jason is not fooled and begins thrusting a boat hook in and out of the boat, and it comes out bloody. So presumably Robert is skewered on the end of this thing.
This is where one of my least favorite parts of the movie shows up, which is where, like, geographically, I don't even know where we are anymore, but Elias Voorhees shows up out of nowhere and stabs Angelica somewhere. It's bad enough that she's down for the count. We don't know if she's dead yet, but she's down. And then Jason shows up. And I guess he was already there because he was, doing those other killings with of Rob and whoever else was around. But Elias is yelling at Jason, "Kill him, boy! Kill him! Kill him!" And Jason's kind of like torn because he doesn't know. What is he trying to like? Elias is trying to get Jason to finish the job on Angelica. Is that what it was?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, so
and the little sister.
That's right. And so Elias is telling Jason to finish the job, which we presume he was going to do anyway. But for some reason, he's pausing, and it's almost like he just decides that he's not going to listen to his father anymore. And we don't know like what kind of interactions Jason and Elias have had over the years. Like, is this the first time Jason is seeing his father in 50 years or whatever, or have they been like a tag team for generations? Like, I have no idea what the dynamic is here, but Jason, like, I don't even remember. So what does he do? He like lifts his mask up or something?
Well, okay. So, Jason has cornered the two young girls, the two little kids, and Elias is telling Jason to, like you say, go ahead and finish the job. One thing I thought here, maybe, and this is pretty thin, but maybe, part 6, we see Jason kind of intrigued by that little girl, Nancy. Like, he never kills her. He never threatens the little kids directly. It seems like he's almost got like a soft spot for little kids. And he'll wait until they get older and they'll kill him. But he remembers being a little boy. And so he maybe isn't protective, but is less hostile to little kids. So what I kind of came away from this scene feeling like was Elias is yelling at him, kill these little kids, kill these little kids. And Jason instinctively doesn't want to do that. So instead, he actually skewers Elias with the boat hook, kind of pinning them together. And while, they're in close proximity, Elias lifts Jason's mask off and sees the ruin beneath. And then for some reason says, like, "You're not my son." And Jason seems kind of sad about this.
Yeah. I mean, forgive me for not really figuring out what was going on in this scene. It was I just felt like there was a lot going on and I couldn't figure it out. But yeah, like when he lifts the mask up, I didn't know how to interpret Elias's remark. Like, was he saying "you're not my son" because he was disappointed that he didn't kill these girls, or is he saying you're not my son because you're way uglier than I remember you being?
Right.
Like,
Right.
it's just, it was a weird time for him to say that. Like, if he had said it before the mask or whatever, like, or before he lifted the mask up, then fine. But it just left it open to interpretation. Like, well, what is he disappointed about?
Right. That's, yeah. I mean, and I thought the same thing. And the only other thought I had was that, like, maybe they haven't really seen each other since he was resurrected as a little boy. And so maybe Elias is seeing just the horrible shell of a creature that his son has become. But Elias is an evil character too. So I don't care if he's upset that his son has become this monster. Like, it doesn't line up for me. But Elias is dropped to the ground, presumably dead, and Jason kind of recovers his face and then trudges off, leaving everyone else alive.
And is this when we cut to 2 weeks later?
We do get a quick scene where Deputy Tucker is helping everyone away, and we see that Elias's body has disappeared.
That's
and
right.
We get one last shot of Jason watching this all through the mist, but again, he's just standing there watching. He's not attacking them again. And then, yes, we cut to 2 weeks later, and things seem back to normal.
And then one of the cops that we had seen running around throughout the movie, I think it's the same cop that showed up on the beach at the the final scene. He and the coroner show up at the Jarvis house, and Angelica, who was near death 2 weeks ago, is good as gold. Like, she kind of like scampers out of the house, like almost excited to see the cop and the coroner. So she's completely healed. And you had mentioned this earlier, but the coroner mentioned something about Elias Voorhees having 3 different death certificates. So because it's at the very end of the movie, they're probably setting up some sort of story for the sequel, potentially. I don't know. But then the coroner mentions that of all the deceased people that they have come across, Tommy Jarvis is not on the list. So at least they know, or at least they think that Tommy is not dead and that he's still out there somewhere.
And he chooses that exact moment to call the younger daughter on her cell phone.
Tommy does.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't hear the conversation, but it's enough for them to know that, like, Tommy's out there somewhere and still alive. And so it's kind of all they need to hear, I guess. Which,
I mean, basically renders the point of this scene moot, because other than learning that Elias Voorhees has died 3 times, there was this moment of worry whether it meant Tommy was alive or dead, but it's completely undercut because he calls 2 seconds later. And the signal breaks up, so we don't know exactly where he is or what he's doing, but he's alive. And then the cops leave.
Well, it would have been nice if, like, the coroner, like, gets out of the truck and he's like, so, you know that redheaded girl that died, that no one knew who she was? Well, here's who she is. And, like, goes on this, like, 5-minute backstory of, like, so she was out camping by herself, and she was, trying to learn how to be sexy for her boyfriend. So she was learning how to, take off her clothes in a sexy way, and she was practicing, and like just like some ridiculous story where, like, the editors, as they like were putting together, they're like, shit, we never explained who this redhead is.
So we get coroner exposition.
Right. And it's like some like ADR dialogue too that doesn't match.
Right. Like they freeze frame. And it's just like he's talking there, like maybe they have like a clutch cargo mouth moving or something. So another little garbled moment here is that I thought both cops get into the police vehicle and drive away, but then a cop hands Angelica Tommy's messenger bag. Like, I thought he thought you'd want to have this or something. And I mean, first of all, I thought the cops already left, so that was weird. But then, like, what's messenger bag? What? We've never seen Tommy carrying around a messenger bag, so I'm sure it'll be addressed in the sequel.
Oh, but... no. It's not Tommy's. It's Rob's messenger bag. The author.
Oh.
Because he had a bag, because when they were way back when they were at Dr. Cruz's house, the psychiatrist or whatever, he steals her notes.
Stealing stuff.
he steals her
That's
notes,
right.
and that's where they learned that Jason had apparently been cited in New York City or whatever. So it's all of Rob's research for the book.
Okay.
And he was handing it over to Angelica.
Got it. And he's not going to need it because he's dead. So
right.
Okay. Then we close on Elias alive, sitting at a campfire where he's burning a photo of great grandma. Presumably he stole it from her cat piss smelling house.
Well, there was 3 people in the photo. So there's one that's like, it's either actually a photo of Tom Matthews from part 6, like superimposed next to great grandma. And then there's a third person that's cut out. And I'm wondering if it's because they didn't get the rights to use the image of Tommy's mom from part 4. Because it's like, it's a weird kind of like, it's very deliberately cut off on that third person.
Or it'll turn out to be Tommy's dad, because we don't know what happened to Mr. Jarvis.
That's true. Yeah.
So maybe we're going to get Mr. Jarvis coming back for Vengeance 2.
Great.
But as Elias is sitting here burning this photo, Jason is standing nearby, almost like a statue. I mean, he's not looming. He's not concealed. I mean, he's there. I think Elias knows he's there, and he's just standing there.
It's weird. Yeah, it's just to set up that they both survived, and I don't know what the point is, because like it's a slow reveal that Jason is also there. So I think it's just meant to set up like they're partners now. Like they're going to be working together. Like, I don't know. It's going to be like
I'm too old for this shit.
Yeah, it's going to be like a buddy cop movie for the second one, but it was unnecessary. But again, saying this before we watch the sequel, so maybe this is all gonna. They had this planned out and they know what they're setting up, but there's just a lot of like, okay, like let's bring this movie to a close. Like, what's going on here?
Mm-hmm. And then it cuts to the end credits. This was directed by Jeremy Brown. There were, as with many of these fan films, the same names appear frequently in the credits, pulling multiple duties and roles as necessary. It had one of my favorite kinds of songs. I referenced it in my introduction to this episode, Sweet Killer, where the song lyrics basically describe what's happening in the movie. And I always find that kind of thing pretty hilarious, and I enjoyed it quite a bit.
I forgot to mention that there's and I'm going to be completely making this up because I don't remember what it actually was, but there's a really, really bad song that's playing during the scene where that mystery girl gets killed near the end, the redhead. Okay. And it's like
my favorite character.
Right. So she's like got like a, radio or something, and it's just like this generic, like, I guess kind of like heavy metal song. And it's just like the lyrics are something like, I'm so angry, I'm angry. Or it's just something like, it's just so like, that's what I was paying attention to during that scene. I was like, well, I don't know who this girl is, so I'm not paying attention. And I'm listening to the music, but it was just, if it's on the soundtrack, I'm going to have to see if I can track it down because it was hilarious.
Any thoughts about the credits? Anything jump out at you?
Well, you had mentioned Diana Prince, who's the adult star that played Marilyn, who is one of the tour guides, and I just thought it would be fun to point out some of the titles of some of the movies that she's been in the past. These are not necessarily, I wouldn't say these are my favorite movies, but these are my favorite titles, and I'm just going to apologize in advance. So if anyone is offended by overly sexual content, maybe just turn the episode off now. But the first one is Pussy Party 20, MILFs Naked and Nasty.
Add to cart.
Next one is Teen Motherfuckers, where MILFs and teens collide 2.
Add to cart.
This is my favorite title. Don't Tell My Wife I Butt Fucked Her Best Friend 3. 3. So this is the third time that this poor guy has done this to his wife.
That's what I was going to ask. Is it the same character doing it all 3 times, or
or is the person being butt fucked? Does it happen to them 3 times? And then the last one is hot nude divorcees gone lesbo. So, I mean, you got to give these movies credit. Like, they tell you exactly what you're going to get, and you have to respect that.
So you and I have been playing the online game Framed, which is basically like a movie screenshot version of Wordle. I wonder if there's an adult version of that.
Like, is this Teen Motherfuckers Where Milfs and Teens Collide Part 1 or 2? I do remember this buttfuck scene, but I don't remember this angle.
Oh, dear.
So, yeah, those are the only comments I had on the credits.
Well, after the credits, there actually is a little post-credits tag where we learn that Robert, the author who was skewered under the overturned boat, is alive. One of his eyes has been gouged out, but he's not dead. Oh, thank God.
Oh, no way. I missed that. Was it was it at the very end of the credits?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I guess I didn't make it that far, so I missed it. So, all right. I guess he's probably wondering where his messenger bag is.
His glass eye is in the messenger bag. So overall thoughts?
For the most part, it was fine. This was the first feature-length fan film that we've watched, and so I was a little concerned going into it. Like, are they going to be able to sustain a story? I think it moved pretty quickly, and that's probably because there was 25 scenes per minute, and so you're just constantly jumping somewhere else. But we obviously discussed the biggest issues, which is the change of the story that we know. And fine, it's a fan film. It doesn't have to be what actually happened. I'm questioning where they're going to go with it, and if they've really thought through some of the ramifications of these decisions. Because the biggest one that I have is, why is Jason like the way he is if his mom truly wasn't the killer and he didn't see her get killed? Because that's always been Jason's motivation. And now that's been thrown into question, and I doubt that they're ever going to explain that in a way that makes sense. But I'm completely willing to just say, look, this is just one of at least 2 movies in this storyline, so let's see what happens in the second one. But I had some problems from a narrative standpoint, but from a film quality standpoint, I thought it looked great. It was a good looking movie. There's tons of kills, probably too many kills, at least from a podcasting standpoint, where we got to keep track of all of them. But there was a lot of really interesting kills, way too many characters. But for the most part, I thought it was fun. It was a decent time with some questionable choices that were made.
I found this one, of the fan films that we've watched so far, I found this one to be the most difficult to get through. That's not to say there weren't parts that I enjoyed. There certainly were. I don't know. It didn't hang together well enough to keep my interest up. And there were certainly some choices they made that I very strongly dislike. But again, it's essentially an Elseworlds tale. It's a fan movie, fine. I praise them for doing it. There was enough in it that they did that was cool. That I'm happy it exists. I'm actually interested to see the sequel, even though I didn't love this one, because I just am wondering where they're going with it.
Me too.
What are they trying to accomplish here? It's a long shot that they will do anything that turns my opinion around about this movie, but it's possible. So I'm curious to see what they've got up their sleeve. I was happy to see them engage, Steve Dash and C.J. Graham and, too many legacy characters, but clearly they have fondness for this series, and I understand the impulse to want to pack in as much reference and fan service as you can. I think that's the wrong way to go, but I can understand the impulse. I cracked up that Diana Prince was in it. I think I love when people from completely different industries whatever your opinions are on adult entertainment, I love when people from other industries are so engaged in stuff like this, and she's clearly a fan, so that's hilarious. I think it's awesome. And good for her for kickstarting it or whatever she did to get involved. But yeah, I liked the tone that they achieved. It wasn't super serious. They weren't taking themselves too seriously. That was probably my one complaint about the Never Hike movies, is that they were a little bit too straightforward. But this is probably the one that I've had the least fun watching, because it wasn't bad enough to rip on it, but it didn't hang together enough to keep my interest up.
I think that's fair. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. I couldn't decide if it was just more of a struggle to get through because it was the longest of the movies that we've watched, or if it was just the story. Like there were things that I enjoyed, and there was enough like goofy things in there that kept it moving for me. But I think it was more like the reason why I got through it, I felt a little bit quicker, was just because I was like, wait, what? And like, I just was like hoping that the next scene was going to explain something. And so I was like looking forward to the next scene. And then there was like something stupid that would happen and it wouldn't explain it. And so like, there was always something that was keeping it moving for me. But yeah, we're not going to rank these fan films or anything like that. But I don't think it's unfair to say that this one was probably the harder of the ones that we've seen to get through. Whether it was the length or whether it was the story, I don't know. But yeah, it was fine, and I'm curious to see what happens in the sequel, which we'll get to. I don't know, a couple of months maybe. So anything else before we wrap up?
Not on my end.
All right. Well, maybe next time we record, we'll know even more about this pre-remake or whatever they're calling it. But
well, in next episode, we're going to talk about the butt fucking movie, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. The trilogy. We have to talk about the trilogy.
I wonder if the third one is in 3D.
Actually, that reminds me, because one of our listeners said that they appreciated it when we concluded the episode by saying what we were going to talk about next time. So people have some time to prepare. So the next one we'll be talking about is Voorhees. And that one is the longest of all of the fan films that we're going to be doing. So we'll see how that one holds up, but that will be next. So you've got some time to check it out. So if you want to know what happens in Pussy Party 19, you'll just have to tune into next episode. But until then, you're all...
Well, I already know what's happening because I'm in it. So you're all doomed.
You're all doomed.